Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. I am Maggie, your host. Welcome back for another episode. I'm here with John. How are you, John?
What's up, everybody? I'm pretty good.
Pretty good, minus your headache.
I do have a headache right now. It's kind of like one of those that feels like someone's jabbing in the side of my head.
That's nice.
Right this moment.
In the temple?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mine are always just dead on right in the center of the forehead. Yeah, not fun.
Yes. Surviving.
Yes. All right. Well, question for you today. Tell everybody about the best tacos in Chattanooga. If I'm like, where can I find good tacos? I know you have an answer for this.
Maggie, you know that I hate questions that are like best ever. You know, like this is why you did this, to frustrate me, because I have so many favorite tacos, but the best, so street tacos. I love the street tacos at Santi's and at Taco Rock. Okay. Taco Rock's very authentic. If you've ever been there, even the building itself is very authentic. And so I love going to Taco Rock, like Shallowford Lee Highway area. And then Santi's over by the mall. They've got these birria tacos that are amazing. And so those are probably my favorite tacos.
Yes, I have experienced those birria tacos, and they're very good. How do the street tacos at Taco Rock compare to the street tacos at El Jinete?
At Janet's?
Yeah, Janet's.
The street tacos at Janet's, they're okay. Yeah, they're okay. But there's something about them at Taco Rock that I just really like. I think their al pastor is way better than Janet's, and really anywhere else I think that I've had in Chattanooga. Okay, good to know. Yeah.
And Taco Mamacita, do you even consider that? Is that like a taco to you, or is that just like a totally different category?
So like Taco Mamacita, agave and rye.
Yeah.
That's a place, right?
Yes.
I've been there once. Like those like real fancy tacos. Like there's a place for those, but like I'm not, when I'm thinking like, let's get tacos, that's not what I'm thinking. That's like, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. Yeah. What is that, like yuppie Mexican? I
don't know what they call that. That's not Tex-Mex. I don't know what the category is.
I feel like everything I'm thinking right now I probably shouldn't say.
Yeah, that's best. So. Okay, last question about tacos. Do you enjoy making tacos at home, and how do yours compare to those places?
So I don't enjoy making tacos at home, really, because at home it's kind of like American tacos, you know, where it's like
ground beef and cheese.
Ground beef and cheese and lettuce.
Yeah, and your taco kit.
Yeah, like I don't know how they do it. Like the street tacos, you said taco kit, and now I'm thinking about that because I was thinking about taco cat and how that's a palindrome. Because it's spelled forward and backwards. When a word is spelled forwards and backwards, it's called a palindrome.
Why do you know that word?
I don't know. But I will tell you this. Next week, we have a date on the calendar that is a palindrome. Like April, I think it's like April 24th, 2024. If you do 42424, it does the same thing.
So the numbers are the palindrome.
Yeah, like forwards and backwards, like taco cat, mom, race car, dad.
Yes. Okay, I see it.
They like, you know, not that taco cat is a real word, but you were talking about taco kit.
Yes.
And I was talking about how I don't make Mexican tacos, street tacos at home, because I don't know how to do like the cilantro and onions and all of that together. Like, I don't know. I think, and I don't love cilantro. I like it on street tacos.
I love cilantro.
Really? Like, could you just like take a bite out of cilantro?
I would, but mostly I just want like a lot of it on lots of foods.
Okay.
Do you have that genetic thing?
Where it tastes like soap?
Yeah.
I don't, but I think my wife does, because she does not like cilantro. Katie does not like it.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. All right. Well, we talk about this for no reason.
We taco about this.
Taco about that for no reason. All right. On Sunday, you continued our series in Galatians. We have how many more weeks left in Galatians?
I didn't talk about tacos at all on Sunday.
Yep. Just completely
We have 2 more Sundays of Galatians.
All right. This series has been really, really great. I know that our whole church family has grown as we have looked at these truths over and over and learned about the gospel. So
Good.
I think it's been really great.
Yeah.
All right. So on Sunday, though, you talked about this kind of warning that Paul gives us. But before you got to that, you talked about welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you, and this kind of culture that we want to have in our church of extending that welcome of Christ to one another. I think by God's grace, He has done that in us. Like,
yes.
We are a welcoming church. That's something we hear often that's very encouraging. What does it, in your mind, what are some of the ways we do that? What does it look like to extend that welcome of Christ?
Well, okay, so one thought is that we see one another, and we see those who come in that maybe are new, and we see them as people who are looking for people. They are looking for community, looking for friendship, looking to be welcomed and accepted, because that's how we all realize we all are, right?
Yeah.
So when we see people, like, we're excited to see them and get to know them or meet them or connect them to somebody, at church. So I think just being welcoming is one thing I think about. And I think you see that with Jesus. I don't know that you ever see like an encounter with someone where he's like not excited to see them, and so that was one thought. And then probably the more spiritual aspect of this is that Jesus welcomes us in our brokenness. And so when we welcome each other with the welcome of Christ, we understand that we are all broken, and there's compassion for that, and there's patience for that, and there's understanding for that. There's no judgment in that. And so we welcome you to come and be who you just be broken, and not be perfect and not have it all together. And Jesus welcomes you into his presence that way. And then what I said on Sunday is that we just shouldn't expect to stay that way, because Jesus wants to change us.
Yes.
And so you see that, in the way he welcomes folks that other people did not want to welcome. And then there's usually some version of, hey, now as you leave this encounter, go and sin no more kind of thing. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to go back to that broken way.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's loving one another and welcoming one another in such a way that just wants more Jesus for one another.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to grow. I want you to change, and I am willing to let the Lord use me to that end.
Yes.
And that's how we all kind of work together in a team sport of helping one another grow and change and look more and more like Jesus for the sake of others.
Let's never be a church that gives the impression that you have to have fixed it all up before you're able to come and be welcome.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, and I realize that sounds great, but can be a challenge. It can be hard. But I think what that really means is you think about what the examples are that may be starting to come into your mind about people who may come into the doors of Two Rivers Church, or come into the community of our church, and they aren't living the right way, or walking the right way, or living the right lifestyle. I mean, just you fill in those blanks. Like, Christ welcomes them, and then he wants to work in them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that can make us very uncomfortable when we meet that and we see that potential mess and the difficulty of that. We can be really quick to want to fix it, and like, you need to get your act together real quick, Doug,
Yes.
to
Doug.
draw back on
Yeah.
that sermon. But I think the way Christ welcomes someone like that is by like patiently and gently entering into that mess, and loving them through that. So I think that's beautiful. And I think, again, kind of like I said, I am so encouraged. I feel like that is who God has made our church family, and may we just keep being that, and never lose sight of how he's created our church to be and to love people.
Yes.
We talked about this warning that Paul gives in Galatians, where he kind of gives this list of these fleshly ways of living and behaving, and these indulgences that people can give into. But before we kind of get into the list, he makes a distinction with this list where he says those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And you helped us see that there's a difference between struggling with these sinful desires and practicing these sinful desires. So just kind of, again, for us, help us understand what is that distinction.
Yeah. Well, just think about like why you would practice something. You usually practice something to get better, right? Like, so that these things become more ingrained in who you are. If it's a sport or, a craft or something, it's muscle memory. The more you practice something, the more you rehearse something, like the more you're likely to remember it, and you're forming these pathways in your brain. And so when we practice something, we get better at it. Well, we certainly don't want to practice these works of the flesh, fits of anger and division and envy and jealousy. And so if we start to think of it like that, when we kind of put up with these things in our lives and we sort of live with it, and we're not willing to go after it, and make war against it, then we're kind of practicing it and we're getting better at it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get better at this stuff. I want to destroy it. And so there is a difference. I mean, Paul said those who do such things, or could be translated those who practice, who continually do these things without repentance and without trying to destroy this sin in their lives, like they will not inherit the kingdom of God. That's the warning. And that should call all of us to attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is a warning that we have to heed, because it can be so easy to have these like pet sins in our life that we have just kind of gotten very comfortable with practicing, and have just kind of feel like they've become our way of life. And I think that's another way to kind of make that distinction is like, is this something you're pushing back against and fighting hard against and repenting of? Or is this like you fully embrace this as a way of life?
Yeah.
And so I think that can be a helpful question to ask ourselves, like what sins and tendencies like this and fleshly indulgences have become a way of life for me that I'm just continuing in and have normalized and am holding tightly to, and don't want anyone to threaten taking that away from my flesh.
Yeah. And, this kind of goes into that dangerous prayer that we talked about back in January of just like, Lord, search my heart, like search me and know me, because I don't even know if I know me that well, and I mean, I think to a certain degree, I probably do know what these things are that I'm living with, but kind of, but why am I doing that? Like what is it why am I holding on to this thing? Why am I not just killing this thing? Why am I not going after it all out? There must be something that I think it gives me, or I'm holding on to it because I don't believe that God will give it to me, whatever that is, One of the things that I didn't get to talk about in the sermon on Sunday was a tool that you have talked about in our core class, which is going on right now. You just finished week 2 on Sunday. And it's called the Digging Deeper chart. And that is something that sometimes helps us in that engage the heart time in our life groups, because it's important to see like what we do that is a part of these works of the flesh.
Yes.
But it's also important to understand why we're doing them, and that's what that Digging Deeper chart does. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the idea is that you kind of identify what that fleshly behavior is. And that's kind of like the fruit of sin is the way you're behaving or the attitude that you have. And so you want to start asking yourself questions or asking one another questions to dig deeper and start to identify what lie or even what idol is kind of driving that behavior and what's up underneath that.
Yes.
And so you can ask questions like, okay, well, what is, when you do that, when you have that attitude, when you act out on that, what is the lie that you're believing? You're believing that that thing may give you only what God can give you, or maybe you're believing a lie about yourself. And in light of that lie about yourself, what is the lie that you might be believing about who God is? And so you just kind of dig it down. And then once you kind of identify some of those core idols or like lies that are underneath the surface, that's where the gospel can like interject specifically to that lie,
Yes.
In a way that like most kills it and most confronts it with the truth of the gospel.
Yes.
And then once you have kind of like identified the truth of the gospel, then you kind of work your way back up and say like, okay, well, in light of this truth about who God is, what is now true about me, and what is now true about like how I can behave and the attitude that I can have, and what actions can flow out of that truth. So if you think about it, it kind of makes a U shape.
Yeah.
Like you dig down, the gospel,
find that root,
like idol or lie, and then like crush it with that truth of the gospel, and then work your way, come back up.
Yeah.
So that is a super helpful tool. And as I was encouraging the core class on Sunday, I'll encourage you all to like ask yourself those questions. And the reason we do that is because the more kind of confident and equipped we are to identify those lies in ourselves, the more confident and equipped we can feel to help a brother or sister kind of sort through some of that stuff. And the more we grow in our ability to preach the gospel to ourselves, the more we grow in our ability to preach the gospel to one another. So that is super helpful, because we can try to fight sin, but it can kind of turn into a game of whack-a-mole, right? Where it's like you're just cutting it off at the surface, but because you haven't addressed that like deep underlying driving force, it kind of just keeps popping up in other ways.
Whack-a-mole.
Yeah, guacamole.
Whack-a-mole. I want some tacos and some
that's the drawback to
whack-a-mole.
tacos that we needed. All right, so let's take a dive into some of the things that are on that list. And I specifically want to talk about sorcery. So I know that can feel like random and obscure to people, and I think at first glance everyone would be like, I don't do that. But give us grace, listeners, because I do want to talk about this and kind of pull on this thread and maybe discover ways that some of this may be in our hearts and in our flesh that we're not aware of. But this is not a lighthearted topic, and we're going to be kind of processing this in real time. So give us grace. So I wanted to kind of think through like, okay, what are some modern day versions of how we see this? And as I was kind of reading about this and thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this more and more. And I think because of our culture's like hard shift away from religion for so long, and kind of how de-churched we are in our like country right now, I think that has kind of opened the door for actually people to be far more interested than we think they are in spiritual things. And so that works to our advantage when that interest leads them to ask us questions. But it's scary when that interest in spiritual things leads them to find kind of cultish practices. And so some of the things that you've probably heard of or seen, and you may think like, oh, that's not really happening. Well, it is happening. And I think it's even, there's a rise in the interest of it, are things like crystals. And I know, again, like this can sound like nobody's doing that, but this is real and it's really happening. I was actually with one of my sisters at a coffee shop, and she was pregnant at the time, and someone approached us with crystals and wanted her to pick out the crystal that would best suit her baby. We didn't quite understand, but it was a very bizarre experience. And if you've ever had an experience like that, you can look back on it and like with kind of discerning eyes be like, that was dark. And there you almost like can look back and be like, I felt in a sense the evil forces at play in that person's life. And that's why we have to have such a caution and a heaviness about this, because there are real evil forces at work. And that's not something that we want to play games with or take lightly. It's like life or death. And we like completely uphold the truth and reality that the power of Christ is like just far stronger and far like crushes those powers, but that at the same time they're real.
Their powers nonetheless.
Yes, exactly. So there's things like that. There's things like people trying to like converse with the dead, psychics trying to tell you the future, horoscopes, astrology, like things like that. You can probably think of things you've seen or heard because it's become kind of popular even on like social media or in like pop culture, I think. And so at the heart of all of these things, I think we see this desire to have power or to tap into some type of power, and a desire to have some type of secret inside knowledge.
Yes.
And so while I think a lot of us would say like, this sorcery thing isn't me because I'm not doing chants, I'm not like trying to talk to dead people, none of that is me. Yet I saw in myself still this fleshly desire to have secret knowledge or to like tap into some type of magic power that can kind of almost be like a quick fix for something.
Yeah.
And I was even thinking of this with like medicine and nutrition. And so this is where I'm going to be like super careful, because medicine is a good gift from God.
Yes.
And like the common grace of us having antibiotics and like ways to heal our bodies is a good gift. And I see like Jake wrestling with this a lot. He is in kind of like primary care. So a lot of what he deals with is people coming to him just wanting medicine. And it's like he will explain to them over and over and over, like, actually, I think if you do X, Y, or Z, that would help you. Or actually, this medicine that you're asking me for isn't going to solve the problem that you're coming to me with. But people just want like a magic pill.
Yes.
And I think that desire, that fleshly desire, is in all of us to just want that quick fix and that magic pill and some kind of power that is like, it's kind of this sorcery concept. And so what I'm not saying at all is that like going to a doctor is practicing sorcery, or that like taking medicine is. I'm just like wanting to explore the ways that the fleshly like desire is kind of in all of us.
Yes.
Thoughts on everything I just said?
Can I take the ibuprofen now for my headache, please,
yes,
Maggie?
That is a common grace. Take it.
Yes, okay. Wow. Well, I think you kind of nailed it from the standpoint of just wanting secret knowledge, wanting power, wanting control.
Yeah.
Or maybe even like, to use a different word for wanting, just sort of longing for that, because that will give us some sense of
being God almost.
Yeah. And isn't that the lie in the Garden of Eden?
Yes.
When Satan told, Adam and Eve, like, if you eat that fruit, you'll be like God, right? Which was such a lie, because they had never been more like God in their sort of perfection of his creation. And then once they ate the fruit, now that image of God is like marred and broken, right? So like there's something in all of us that want that, like we want to be God, even though that would probably really scare us, Bruce Almighty, but I think I'm just saying what you're saying. Like, we want kind of that control or that power to be God. And we as Christians just need to be careful that this is growing in prevalence in our culture doesn't just start becoming the waters we swim in. And then we've got some kind of like Christian version of it, like something that's okay. And so we just need to be careful about that.
I agree. It was helpful for me to see like where this is in scripture. So let me read this. It's Deuteronomy 18:10-12. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Or one who inquires of the dead. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And so when I read that, I was just like, oh my goodness. Like, these things, sorcery, charmer, fortune telling, those are in the same list as child sacrifices. Yeah. And so I think that's just trying to get across the like how offensive these practices are to the Lord.
Yes.
And I also found this John Piper quote to be really helpful, just to kind of summarize these thoughts. He says, no matter how innocent the practices of the occult seem at first, they are all dimensions of the one rebellion that has been underway since the Garden of Eden. The aim to avoid at all costs childlike submission to the limitations and provisions of a sovereign God, and to get instead a power which can be called great. Man in the occult is man in rebellion. So it's just kind of what we're talking about. Like, this desire in all of us to like rebel against our limits as humans and tap into some secret knowledge or secret power that's in all of us. And so I think, but what Galatians would tell us is like there's actually a joy and a freedom that comes with like making war on those things and fleeing those things and joyfully submitting to our limits as humans and to the authority of God and his power as the only one that knows the future, the only one that has power, the only one that has all knowledge. Like he's the one we can trust to hold all of those things.
Yeah. I'm going to give an illustration that may feel kind of way out there and not really related to this, but I think it kind of is, like, because some of this is like, whoa, you know, but like if I just bring this down to like something like, because I'm sitting here thinking like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
You know? And so I'm just going to say this, and it may not be, it's live TV, right? So a friend of mine one time was going through something really challenging. It was stressful. It was work related, but he was a pastor, and so work and life kind of get real blurry. And he went for a walk, and he had this magic device in his pocket called our cell phone with all the to connect you to anything in any place, right? And he as he told the story to me, he was like, as he was processing this stressful situation, he was scared, he was worried about what was going to happen. He kept looking through people he could reach out to, and it's like the Lord stopped him in the middle of that and just said, why don't you reach out to me? Mm-hmm. Why don't you talk to me? And so how is that related to sorcery? Well, I think on a real small scale, we're being invited to turn to the Lord and trust him and not try to find the answers everywhere else.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
The Lord is saying, how about you talk to me?
Yes.
Why don't you come to me with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is such a helpful story, because I think in our kind of lowest moments, when we're kind of grappling with a fear or with like a icky emotion even, how often do we turn towards that magical device, our phone, to like do magic for me? Help me get rid of this icky feeling. Let me just distract myself. Let me see some magic. And I think that pull is in all of us. And so we're not saying that is doing sorcery. Right. We're just saying like that fleshly inclination in all of us to like look for that, when like really our hearts are longing for God, that is a very poor substitute in that moment.
Yes.
Similarly to your story, kind of where I see this in myself is I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, so some of my like weaknesses can tend towards fear and like I want security. So a lot of times for me, I want to kind of know the future. And so kind of with this like fortune telling idea, I want someone to tell me what's going to happen in the future.
Yes.
And so I may turn to some like trusted person and be like, what do you think's going to happen? How do you think I should be prepared for this? Or I'll turn to a news source and try to find someone who will accurately predict the future for me.
Yeah.
And I think that too may be in a lot of us, where it's like we're looking for some sense of security in someone else's prediction of the future, when the only source of security I should be drawing about the future is from God's word and from who he is, and me trusting that like he's in the future. So I don't have to know what's going to happen. So I encourage everybody to just read through that list again in Galatians, and just really ask the Lord to search you and know you, and ask him to show you and reveal to you where some of those tendencies might be in your own flesh. And so I think the encouragement would be, make war on that. And one of the first things you can do to make war on that is to put that in the light at Life Group this week and engage the heart by telling your brothers and sisters, this is where I see myself in this list, or this is a sin I've been making a practice of, and I want to stop making a practice of it and start walking in a new way. So I encourage everybody to do that.
That's great, Maggie.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back next week.
See ya.